For people who don't know, Life Below Zero. It's this crazy show where people live, in this very rugged terrain, and you had the most interesting life because when you would live up at the cabin, you would live by yourself, just you in a very small room, just hunting all your food and hiking around. You didn't use any vehicles, and you just kind of had a rifle and a frying pan and a pot and a place to sleep, and you seem really happy up there.
Oh, yeah. I'm having a good time. I just wanted to strip everything away that I could dispense with, I got the idea I wanted to go back to living like a hunter-gatherer. Back in 97, I just got this idea. I was actually living in a tent in the woods down in Vermont, having such a good time. I thought, where could I go with this? What could I do with this kind of lifestyle? And I decided to move to the Brooks Range of Alaska.
What was it like? What made you go live in a tent in the first place?
I just always liked the outdoors. I just love nature. And, I was doing other things too, but there was this one summer when I was in my 20s when I found this really cool spot in the woods, and I thought, hey, I'll set up a teepee over there, and I'll just hang out there this summer as much as I can. And I just had a great time. So I started thinking more about, instead of just living in the woods kind of as a recreational thing, I started thinking about, hey, how could you actually make a life living like this? Get up every morning with the animals around, the sky, the water. I started thinking about it. I started reading anthropological stuff about hunter-gatherers that summer. And I started getting ideas. And it took me 7 years to make it to the Brooks Range and to get out to that lake that you've seen on TV and to actually start living that way. It took me a few years just to organize my life enough to move up to Alaska. And then once I got to Alaska, I was kind of in Fairbanks for about 4 years before I could really spend long periods of time in the wilderness. But once I got it all arranged, I just drove up the Hall Road, which is this industrial road that goes up to the North Slope oil fields. It's very, very unimproved in areas, just gravel road for hundreds of miles. I drove about 300 miles north of Fairbanks. I parked my van, and I walked 60 miles off of that road by myself out into the wilderness and started figuring out how to live off the land.
How did you know where to go?
Oh, I had found the spot a few years before. I had actually found that lake flying around in a little bush plane. Because part of my plan originally, when I formulated this idea back in Vermont, I thought, I'll become a bush pilot. That'll be a thing I can do in Alaska, So I was thinking about starting an air taxi service. I had been studying flying for a few years. As soon as I got my private license, I jumped in the plane and flew to Alaska. But then when I got up there, I was getting my commercial and all that. And in the meantime, as much as I could, I'd go out and explore, look around. And I discovered this lake one day when I was flying across part of the Brooks Range. And I set up a little tent camp there that summer, 2000. But it took me another 4 years before I could actually walk out there and start living.
60 miles walking.
Yeah.
That's a long fucking way.
Hey, I walked the length of Vermont when I was 13 years old. I walked,
Did you really?
Massachusetts to Canada. But the difference is
when you're 13?
Yeah. I actually started when I was 12, gave up. And I was with my uncle. We went for about a week, and then the next summer I convinced my mom to drive me back down and drop me off alone where we had given up the year before. But that's
just you by yourself?
Yeah. When I was 13, I was alone. But that's a trail. That's called the Long Trail, and it's marked. There's a little paint mark, on the trees up ahead of you telling you where to go.
Yeah, but still, you were 13.
Yeah.
That's a little kid.
Yeah.
And your mom's like, go ahead.
It was amazing. I was given a lot of freedom.
I guess so.
I mean, I'd already quit school by the time I was 13,
Really?
I went back a few times, but yeah, I mean, I never finished the fourth grade, to tell you the truth. But I went back. I went to 1 year of high school. Eventually, I was curious about what was going on over there.
Did you ever get a GED or any of that jazz?
No, I never needed a GED for anything I did. But I went to ninth grade, and, I did my own thing after that.
But you seem like an educated guy. Are you self-educated?
If I got any education, it's self-educated,
yeah.
I mean, I like to be learning all the time. Whatever I'm doing, I like to learn. But if I'm making a TV show, I want to learn everything I can about it, If I'm flying airplanes, I want to learn a lot more than I need to know to do what I'm doing. And it's the same thing with going out there and living, just learning as much as I could. There's so much to learn out there.
Now, how long did it take you when you were 13? And, what did you do for food?
Oh, well, that was easy. Buy it at the store and carry it on your back. I never hunted when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I remember going once or twice with some uncles of mine. We never got anything. I didn't have any real hunting experience until that summer I walked out to the lake.
Really?
Yeah.
So you really just had a rifle and didn't quite know what you were doing?
I'd read a lot about what to do. The biggest thing, Joe, I got out there, I had 2 months' food. I left 2 months' worth of food at the lake, okay, to get me started. And I walked out there in July.
Can I pause you for a second? When you say 2 months' food, like what did you bring?
Oh, I had left basic stuff, grains, some beans, some rice.
Stuff that you knew you could survive
a jug
off
of oil, basic, some flour was out there. And I left that the year before when I had a plane. My whole plan to become an air taxi and do the bush flying, at that time I realized this doesn't go together with living off the land in the wilderness. So I actually sold that plane that summer and drove up the road and walked out to where I had left these supplies the year before. And decided that's what I really want to do, just go live off the land. I don't need an airplane anymore. I don't need to fly. So when I got out there, there was a 55-gallon barrel, and it had some food in it. It had a few supplies. I had a tent. It was insulated, but it hadn't really become a cabin yet. It's the same place that you've seen, but it was just a little less solid back then.
And the cabin as it stands, you built?
Yeah. Well, I flew in the plywood and stuff, and then when I got out there, I had a wall tent originally. I'd had a tent camp out there since 2000. I built a plywood cabin under the wall tent, basically. That's what I did. But when I got out there, I had some food. I had my rifle. I had fishing equipment. I started living. I started improving that little cabin, And by September, I ran out of food. I had one bag of flour, this little plastic bag of flour. It was all I had left when it got cold enough that I figured I could start moose hunting. So that was my plan. I got to get a moose.
Why'd you have to wait till it got cold? Just regulations?
Bugs. You got to preserve the meat. I've got no freezer.
Right.
I had to wait until, like I still do when I hunt moose. My moose hunting season starts the day I can leave a scrap of meat out on the ground all afternoon and go look at it, and there's no fly eggs on it.
That makes sense. Wow, that's crazy. So you have to, other than the rifle aspect of it, you're really living like a primitive hunter-gatherer.
I would have used a bow and arrow if I thought I could have survived.
There's your spot right there.
There it is. Hey.
Well, if you only want to gather meat, the rifle's the way to go.
I was always trying to just let go of everything I could do without, but I never got to the point where I thought I could make it with just a bow and arrow myself. People used to survive out there before they even had archery. They survived out there with spears, but there were groups of people. They would build a fence. They would corral animals.
Yeah.
They would put nooses up between trees to get a moose, things like that.
There's also probably a lot more animals.
I don't know that to be the case.
Maybe not Alaska. Alaska probably not too much different, but throughout North America, like if you listen to, or you read rather, the tales of Boone and Crockett, the Lewis and Clark, when they made their way across the country, like they found a lot of game. There was a lot of animals. I mean, it was just an abundance of animals. And then, of course, if they ran into buffalo, obviously there was millions and millions of buffalo.
Unbelievable. That's the difference between Alaska and down here. Down here, we've modified everything.
Yeah.
We've paved everything over.
Alaska's still wild.
Northern Alaska is the most wild place left in this country. That's why I went there.
It's barely this country, too. I mean, it's not even attached.
Yeah, some people don't really think of Alaska as the United States.
It's not.
But
it's not. It's a frozen Puerto Rico. It's way up there. It's not even connected to us. It's one of those weird ones.
But it is wild. And you see, actually, that's what drew me to it. The first time I ever saw the Brooks Range was years before I moved to Alaska. I was on a flight. I used to get jobs as a courier. When I was in my 20s, I was real interested in traveling. And I found out this way I could travel all over the world as a courier. So I would go to New York City. I'd get these jobs as a freelance courier and take off to wherever they need me to go. And one time I got this flight to Tokyo. And I'm flying right across the whole length of the Brooks Range. Great circle route. New York, Tokyo takes you right across it. 600 miles of mountains from the Canadian border over to the Chukchi Sea across from Siberia. And there's one road across it in 600 miles. And I was just glued to the window the whole flight looking at that.
Wow.
I thought someday I'm going to go check that place out on the ground, you know? I mean, it's incredible when you see those mountains. They're big mountains. They're up to 9,000 feet high.
And that one road is the Hall Road?
Yeah, the Hall Road, also known as the Dalton Highway. That was built in 1974 just to construct the Alaska pipeline to get to the oil up at Prudhoe Bay on the North Slope, the oil fields up there. They built that road in one summer. It's an amazing story in itself.
Wow.
Yeah, they started in April, and they had the whole thing done in one summer from the Yukon River all the way up to the Arctic Ocean.